Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. With me today is Stacy Clay, Director of Community Affairs and Midwest Retail Lead for First Bank. Welcome, Stacy.
Nicole, thank you.
So you're at First Bank now, but I don't want to start with that. I want to start with when you and I first met, which was when you were working for St. Louis Public School District, and you were Deputy Superintendent over Student Services, correct?
That's correct. And for those who may not be aware,
what does that mean?
Student support services are essentially all the non-academic services for students and families. So what does that mean? Nurses, counseling, social workers, after-school programs, alternative education, parent concerns and outreach, a few other things, homeless student services. Mm-hmm. It's a variety of things that are non-academic but relate to students and families.
And that's really where you and I first met because, a lot of what we do at Prevent+Ed is that other side of the report card piece, right? Like academics, yes, important. And then there's all of the other things, the social and emotional learning, the early intervention when kiddos maybe start to get into some trouble with substances. And
Right.
You were really instrumental in bringing those services and keeping those services at St. Louis Public. So thank you for that.
Well, certainly want to thank Prevent+Ed for their partnership, not only in the more general substance, drug, and alcohol education, but specifically, if memory serves, Nicole, we partnered on a program involving our alternative education students.
That's correct.
And so if you bring a controlled substance into a school, it is something by statute that cannot be handled at the school level. It has to go through the formal disciplinary process because of the nature of the substance.
So let me pause you. Why is that? Because sometimes we hear from, and I know the answer, but I'd like you to tell our listeners, sometimes, people are saying, well, the school should handle that. And well, if the school doesn't intervene, then, I guess it's not that big of a deal. But I don't think a lot of people understand that statutes say what the school can and cannot intervene on. Right?
That's correct. In the case, there are certain disciplinary infractions, incidents that an individual principal, certainly a teacher in a classroom, cannot address on their own. So certainly a weapon would be example of one, and obviously a gun, the most serious
Sure.
of weapons. That's something that can't be handled by a principal, and from a disciplinary perspective, that has to go to the district administration. But substances, because federally they are considered controlled substances. That goes beyond the authority of the principal and has to go through a formal discipline process. Certainly in school districts in Missouri. I can't speak to other places, but that's our mandate here.
And so what you rolled out is and Megan Marietta?
That's
correct? Yes. So essentially that if a student was it like a first strike situation or was it zero tolerance? How did it work?
So if we had a situation where a student, and let's just make it easy, they have a small amount of marijuana on them. And the amount is actually important because, if they had several bricks of marijuana, then there's an implication associated with trafficking, which gets us into some more significant areas. So the program that you and I partnered with would not be applicable in that circumstance.
Correct.
But let's say it's a very small amount, clearly for personal use. What would happen is, again, to the earlier conversation, the principal would not have authority just to deal with it at a building level. It would have to go through the formal discipline process. But in that process, there's potentially latitude there in terms of what the ultimate discipline turns out to be.
Right.
And so that's where we leveraged the partnership with Prevent+Ed, and we said to the young person and their family, look, there are two options you can take here. We can go down the regular discipline path, which may involve removal from the school, may involve other punishments and penalties, or you can go through drug education and counseling with Prevent+Ed. And if you successfully complete that, and we would stress successfully complete that.
Correct, yes.
Then there would be no further, quote, punishment or penalty associated with the infraction. And so we had several students, pick option B.
Yes, yes.
And several that were successful. Some were not. And we had to go down the aforementioned option A route. But many were successful in going through the program. And we were very hopeful that put them on a path for responsible use.
Yeah. Now, are you like a counselor or a social worker by trade, or how did you get into that piece of education, which is, I mean, I think it's vital. So how did you get into that role specifically?
So I'm not a social worker nor a counselor. I was a classroom teacher for about 6 years.
What grade?
Kindergarten and first grade primarily.
Oh, okay. Sixth grade teacher here. Yep.
So have that experience and background, and taught in St. Louis public schools as well, among a couple of other places. Ran an educational nonprofit for a time that was really focused on college access. Have had the privilege of serving on a school board, University City, on the University City School Board. So have always been in education and understood the dynamics associated with it. So was privileged to be able to work with Dr. Kelvin Adams, who was then the superintendent, is the current superintendent, and student support services at that time was not consolidated under one deputy or kind of in one department. Homeless student services reported to academics, after school reported to academics, but nurses, counselors, and social workers were under what was then student support services. Community education was in another place. And so you had all these pieces that kind of served to support students and families.
Yep.
They weren't the academics. And so based on conversations with Dr. Adams and really implementing his vision, he said, let's bring all these things together.
Wow.
Under one. And so that structure remains today with my successor. And, the key piece of the work was partnering with organizations like Prevent+Ed. Because I mean, if anyone has followed St. Louis Public Schools or school districts in general, they don't have the resources to provide everything that a young person needs, especially in the social emotional realm.
One entity cannot be all things to all people.
Right.
You just can't. And when you start to expect one entity, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school, whether it's a company, to be all things to all people, you're sort of setting yourself up, but you're setting up that organization to fail.
Right.
So, well, that just makes perfect sense to how you're in banking now. No, in my brain, it actually really does make sense, because you're bringing in outside organizations to support St. Louis Public Schools. You're working with other entities to create this sort of network. I mean, to me, it sort of makes sense to transition, but banking, like what are you doing at First Bank?
So was presented with an opportunity in 2018 to transition to First Bank, which was certainly personally a difficult decision. I'd been with St. Louis Public Schools in some form or fashion for 13, 14, almost 15 years. And certainly that's where my heart, a large piece of my heart still remains with St. Louis Public Schools. But the position that was contemplated with First Bank was Director of Community Affairs. And so it would give me an opportunity to bring my contacts, my knowledge of the local educational, in particular, nonprofit landscape, but the nonprofit landscape more generally, to be kind of on the other side, the giving side, and partnering in that way, as opposed, obviously as I was with the district. And so First Bank is just such a tremendous company. It's owned by the Deerberg, so it really has a local emphasis.
Yep.
and wants
Which
to
would
do.
be why there's a First Bank in Deerberg stores, correct?
Yes.
I did not know that, but then it all the stars aligned, and I was like, oh, that
Yes,
makes
yes,
sense.
owned by a different branch of the Deerberg family,
yes.
but absolutely, there's a tight partnership
Mm-hmm.
there, and they are the family and the bank are very committed to doing the right thing in the community, and so they wanted to bring a little bit more structure to their giving and how they were presenting and showing up in the community, and so we had some great conversations, and I made the transition, and so that was in June of 2018. In 2021, August of 2021, also almost a year from that year, I was reporting, community affairs reported into the retail group and got to know who was my boss and still my boss, a gentleman named Rick Sims, who's the chief banking officer. And we had talked about me doing some different things within the retail space. I was certainly very happy with the work I was doing in community affairs, but wanted to continue to grow professionally. And
Sure.
First Bank is really supportive of people who want to grow professionally and do different things. And so an opportunity came up to actually work in the retail space, working with the branch network and our business banking in the Midwest. And so asked me if I was interested. I said yes. And First Bank has been tremendous in providing me the support I need, because everybody there knows I'm not a banker.
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't come
new.
from
It's
banking.
new, right?
But everyone has been fantastic, and I work with a great team of people who are technical experts and really know the ins and outs of banking and making deals and how to serve clients. So it's been fantastic.
A couple of things that you've said as you're talking about your transition to First Bank that I just wanted to pick up on. I mean, one, I do think First Bank is incredibly supportive. Now, I say this, and in full disclosure, we have our mortgage now with First Bank, but I was part of, I think, the First Bank extended family for several years we were never a client. And that's largely because of the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Ambrose.
Right.
But he and many others of your colleagues, were just so warm and so, how can we support Prevent Ed? How can we work together to open doors, to think about, mental health and, how we as a institution are sort of showing up. So I've gotten a lot of just connections and doors opened even before we were clients, which I think is really nice and uncommon, I would say. But then also the thing that I wanted to just ask you about, there seems to be a lot of people from non-traditional sort of backgrounds entering the world of banking. Do you think banking is changing? Or do you think, it used to be like back in the day, like if you worked for a bank, you were like a banker. And now there's all kinds of people that are being drawn to banks because I think banking and reaching people who have traditionally been unbanked is a whole new world that institutions are exploring.
I think you're absolutely right about that. I think banking is changing. I think there's a recognition that, the society is evolving.
We're right.
And in the days of a traditional bank with a banker sitting behind a large wooden desk in an office.
Which, let's be honest, that is intimidating for a lot of people, right?
Right. Those days are gone. Mm-hmm. And so I think, and I really have to credit my boss again, Rick Sims, who's the chief banking officer, for really having a vision that banking needs to be different, frankly, just for basic survival, but should be different to better serve the community. And so when you start thinking about banking or anything being different, you have to begin to look at the people who are actually doing the work.
Right.
And do they look at the work through a different lens? Do they see how it can be done differently? Now, certainly this is not to say that folks who have, deep roots in banking can't innovate, can't look at things from a different perspective. But I think when you start to get people outside of banking in banking, they can look at things in a different way. And I think again, a credit to First Bank is that they embrace that. They embrace people saying, is there a reason that we do it like this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone who's not from banking, if it really doesn't make sense, they're going to ask about it. Frankly, if nothing for no other reason, just out of ignorance. Like,
right.
why
do we do this?
Why do we do it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And then when folks are kind of have to go through the exercise of actually explaining it, it can create some aha moments about, well, maybe we don't need to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that spirit of innovation and really looking at things differently is something that First Bank has really embraced. From the senior leadership levels all the way down. And I think the ultimate manifestation of that is what we're doing with our branches. So folks going to a First Bank branch, let's just fast forward to the end of 2023.
Okay.
Are going to have a really different kind of experience.
Ooh.
So let's talk about the things that will be the same.
Cool.
Right now we have great folks in our branches.
Yeah,
We're always
good customer service.
Great customer service, provide a great client experience. That's going to stay the same. But what's going to be different is the technology that we're employing, both in the branches and with our digital platforms as well. So when folks go into, and this has happened with some branches, but again, let's fast forward to the end of 2023.
Sure. How many branches are there, by the way? Sorry to interrupt.
I think we're at about 34.
Okay.
Now that includes our in-store branches.
Sure.
That includes our in-store branches as well, in the Deerbergs, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But what folks will see in some of our branches, in our Clayton branch, I'll use as an example, you'll see two what are called ITMs, interactive teller machines. And these are teller machines that they do the ATM function. So if you just need to get $50 out, you can stick your card in and do that. But if you need something more significant, need to cash a check, need to make a transfer, need to make a mortgage payment, you can hit the screen and a virtual teller will come up.
Huh.
What do I mean by virtual teller? I don't mean some cartoonish, avatar
like Sims character,
for a person. Right. It's an actual person who you communicate with essentially via Zoom.
Cool.
I mean, that's what the interface is like. So you're dealing with a live person who can handle the transaction as a live teller would.
Huh.
Often a bit more quickly. And you can just get in and get out if that's what you choose to do. But if you have something more complicated, we have folks in the branch who are more than capable of having those more in-depth conversations, because one of the things that's changing in banking is it's about relationships more than anything else.
I think that's everywhere. I think COVID has made relationships more important everywhere, including with the person that you're trusting your money with, because that's really what a bank is, right? It's like a person or a group of people that you trust to help you take care of your money.
Absolutely. And we want to set people up on really a life journey with their finances.
Yes. Talk more about this. I love this. I was hearing about this at that event. So what does that mean? Like their life, like the lifespan? Because there's a lot of things that happen over a person's life and a lot of potential touch points with a bank.
There are. And, we want to engage young people. When I say young people, we're talking about students, high school age or really younger. Mm-hmm. We have a kids savings account. So we want to get young people in the habit of understanding money and how it could work for them early on. So we start with a kids savings account. And then we go to our you can start to get in your 20s. You start having conversations about mortgage. Actually beginning the conversation about retirement. But also about budgeting, just the day-to-day kinds of things. Those are the folks that we have in our branch who are prepared to have those kinds of conversations
and really build that relationship over time.
And building it over time and really, really getting into the nitty-gritty, so folks, even with modest incomes, can have a plan to save for the things that are going to be important to them. So that first house, if that's what you choose to do, marriage, planning for children, college education for those children, retirement, all those things, and everything in between. The fun things too. Hey, we want to go on vacation. We want to do some of these other things.
Or your basement floods or whatever. Right, all the things. And
so we've got folks who are prepared and really eager to have those conversations. And of course, we've got products and solutions for
of course.
every point along that journey. But really, it's more about the conversation and making sure that folks are prepared, because one of the realities, which is tremendous, is that we are living much longer. And so our money is going to have to do things now that it didn't have to do for our parents and grandparents for a much longer period.
Right.
And while we're living longer, I don't think people have a real appetite to work a whole lot longer.
No.
So we're asking our money to do a lot more, and there are ways that we can plan for that.
Excellent. I think that I forget what you called them, basically like the Zoom. What are you calling those?
Interactive teller machines, ITMs.
Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense to me given everything that we had to do in the last 2.5 years, right? I mean, people are more comfortable with screens. People have gotten much more comfortable with talking to a person through a screen.
Right.
And that makes a ton of sense to me. It also, and this is like, we need to have you back for part 2, but with the rise in like cryptocurrency, I think it helps maybe cater to a younger generation who is more, I'll say, tech savvy, for lack of a better word, right? But to me, it makes perfect sense. And so you imagine that those, the branches will have, all of those will be there by the end of 2023?
Yes. We'll be, we're in the process of transforming our branches now. So there are some that definitely have it.
Yeah.
Our branch in Clayton, our branch in Kirkwood, our East St. Louis branch. Our branch on Graham Road is going through that process right now. But we have some other branches that are more traditional, and we want you to come and visit those and have a great experience as those as well. But yes, by the end of 2023, we should be seeing a full transformation in the Midwest.
I knew that you were the right person to have on here, and I knew that First Bank was a bank that we wanted to highlight because of the emphasis that you all place on conversations. And so I'm so grateful for you all to come here today, for you to talk about conversations that you all are having internally at how we can improve things, how we can stay up to date and even innovate way ahead. But also just joining the conversation with me about mental health and kids and all the things. So I feel like we just scratched the surface. You want to come back sometime?
I would love to.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
If you liked this conversation, if you want more where this came from, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to The Preventable. Thank you, Stacy. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.